Sarah's fingers trembled as she reached for her phone, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she shouldn't, but the temptation was too strong. One message couldn't hurt, could it? Just a simple hello to brighten her day. As her thumb hovered over the send button, she caught a glimpse of her wedding ring, the gold band suddenly feeling heavy on her finger. With a frustrated sigh, she tossed the phone aside and buried her face in her hands. How had she gotten herself into this mess? Sarah had always prided herself on her strong moral compass, her unwavering commitment to her family. She was the perfect wife, the doting mother, the reliable friend. But now, at 35, she found herself teetering on the edge of a precipice, ready to throw it all away for a man she barely knew. It had started innocently enough. A chance encounter at a coffee shop, a shared laugh over a spilled latte. Michael had been charming, his blue eyes twinkling with mischief as he offered to buy her a replacement. Sarah had hesitated, her left hand instinctively moving to touch her wedding ring. But something in his smile had made her pause. It was just coffee, after all. What harm could come from a friendly conversation? But one coffee had turned into 2, then 3. Soon, they were meeting regularly, their conversations flowing effortlessly from books to music to their deepest fears and dreams. Sarah found herself opening up in ways she hadn't in years, not even with her husband Tom. With Michael, she felt seen, understood, alive in a way she'd forgotten she could be. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah found herself living for those stolen moments. She'd make excuses to leave work early, fabricate errands that needed running, anything to spend a few precious minutes in Michael's company. And all the while, the guilt gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the lies she was weaving. Tom noticed the change in her, of course. How could he not? The distant looks, the secretive smiles at her phone, the way she'd jump when he entered a room. He'd ask if everything was all right, his brow furrowed with concern, and Sarah would paste on a smile and assure him that everything was fine. Just stress from work, she'd say, or worry about their daughter's upcoming exams. The lies came easier each time, but the weight of them grew heavier. Sarah tried to rationalize her feelings. She and Tom had been together for so long, married for 15 years. It was natural for the spark to fade, wasn't it? The passion that had once burned so brightly between them had dimmed to a comfortable glow. They were partners, co-parents, friends. But when was the last time Tom had looked at her the way Michael did, like she was the most fascinating person in the world? But even as she justified her actions to herself, Sarah couldn't shake the image of her daughter, Emma. Sweet, sensitive Emma, who idolized her parents and their perfect marriage. How would she react if she knew the truth? The thought of disappointing her daughter, of shattering her innocence, was almost unbearable. And yet, Sarah couldn't bring herself to end things with Michael. Every time she resolved to cut ties, to recommit herself to her marriage, one message from him would send her spiraling back into indecision. It was like an addiction, a craving she couldn't satisfy no matter how hard she tried. The situation came to a head on a crisp autumn evening. Sarah had told Tom she was working late, but in reality, she was meeting Michael at a small Italian restaurant on the outskirts of town. As she sat across from him, the candlelight flickering between them, Sarah felt a familiar rush of excitement tinged with guilt. "I've been thinking," Michael said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Maybe it's time we stop pretending. I want to be with you, Sarah, really be with you." Sarah's heart raced at his words. A part of her had been waiting to hear this, longing for it even. But now that the moment was here, she felt a surge of panic. "Michael, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he urged, his eyes intense. "We can figure out the details later. I know you're not happy with Tom. You deserve more than that, Sarah. You deserve to be loved completely, passionately." As Michael spoke, painting a picture of their potential future together, Sarah found herself imagining it. Lazy Sunday mornings spent in bed, romantic getaways, a love that burned bright and fierce. It was tempting, so tempting to give in to that fantasy. But then, unbidden, other images flashed through her mind. Emma's tear-stained face as she learned her parents were separating. Tom's devastated expression as she confessed her infidelity. The judgment in her friend's eyes, the whispers behind her back. Could she really throw away everything she'd built, everything she'd worked for? For this? I can't, Sarah whispered, pulling her hand away. I'm sorry, Michael, but I can't do this. The hurt in his eyes was palpable, and for a moment, Sarah almost wavered. But she steeled herself, knowing that this was the right decision, no matter how painful. I love my family, she continued, her voice growing stronger. What we have. It's been wonderful, and in another life, maybe things could have been different. But I made a commitment, and I can't break that. It wouldn't be fair to anyone, least of all ourselves. Michael was silent for a long moment, his jaw clenched. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with emotion. I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. You're an incredible woman, Sarah. Tom's a lucky man. They parted ways outside the restaurant, sharing one last, lingering hug. As Sarah watched Michael walk away, she felt a mixture of relief and sadness wash over her. She knew she'd made the right choice, but that didn't make it any easier. The drive home was a blur, Sarah's mind racing with thoughts of what she needed to do next. She couldn't continue living this double life, couldn't keep lying to Tom and to herself. It was time to face the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. When she walked through the front door, she found Tom sitting in the living room, a glass of wine in hand. He looked up as she entered, and the concern in his eyes made Sarah's heart clench. Hey, he said softly. I was starting to worry. Everything okay? Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. We need to talk, Tom. The next hour was one of the most difficult of Sarah's life. Through tears and trembling words, she confessed everything. The emotional affair with Michael, the lies she'd told, the doubts she'd been harboring about their marriage. Tom listened in stunned silence, his face a mask of hurt and betrayal. When Sarah finally finished speaking, the silence that fell between them was deafening. She waited, her heart in her throat, for Tom's reaction. Would he yell? Ask her to leave? Tell her their marriage was over? To her surprise, Tom did none of those things. Instead, he reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle despite the pain evident in his eyes. Thank you for telling me the truth, he said, his voice hoarse. I won't pretend this doesn't hurt, because it does. But I love you, Sarah. I've loved you for 20 years, and I'm not ready to give up on us. If you're willing to try, I think we can work through this. Sarah felt a fresh wave of tears spill down her cheeks, this time born of relief and gratitude. I want that more than anything, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Tom. I love you, and I want to make this right. In the days and weeks that followed, Sarah and Tom embarked on the difficult journey of rebuilding their marriage. There were tough conversations, moments of doubt, and times when the pain of Sarah's betrayal threatened to overwhelm them both. But there were also moments of rediscovery, of remembering why they'd fallen in love in the first place. They started seeing a marriage counselor, learning to communicate more openly and honestly. Sarah deleted Michael's number from her phone and committed to full transparency with Tom. It wasn't easy, but with each passing day, she felt the bond between them growing stronger. One evening, about 6 months after her confession, Sarah found herself sitting on the back porch with Tom, watching the sunset. Emma was at a friend's house for a sleepover, giving them a rare moment of peace and quiet. I've been thinking, Tom said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. Maybe we should renew our vows. Sarah turned to look at him, surprised. Really? Tom nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. Yeah, really. I know we've been through a lot, but I feel like we're stronger now than we've ever been. I want to recommit to you, Sarah. To us. What do you think? Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of rightness that she hadn't experienced in a long time. I think that sounds perfect, she said, leaning in to kiss him softly. As they sat there, hand in hand, Sarah reflected on the tumultuous journey that had brought them to this point. The temptation of forbidden desire, the guilt of betrayal, the fear of losing everything, she'd experienced it all. But she'd also discovered the true meaning of love, commitment, and forgiveness. She thought of Michael briefly, hoping he'd found happiness. But any lingering regret or what-ifs had long since faded. This, right here with Tom, was where she belonged. It wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always perfect, but it was real and true and worth fighting for. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Sarah squeezed Tom's hand, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead might not always be smooth, but she knew they'd face it together, stronger and more in love than ever before. In the quiet of the evening, Sarah made a silent vow to herself. She would never again take her marriage for granted, never forget the precious gift she'd almost thrown away. Every day, she would choose Tom, choose their family, choose the life they'd built together. And in that choice, she found a love deeper and more profound than anything she'd ever imagined. The next morning, as Sarah prepared breakfast for her family, she felt a lightness in her step that had been missing for far too long. Emma bounced into the kitchen, her ponytail swinging, and Sarah felt a rush of love for her daughter. "Morning, sweetie," she said, dropping a kiss on Emma's forehead. "Sleep well?" Emma nodded, reaching for a piece of toast. "Yeah, but I'm glad to be home. I missed you guys." Sarah's heart swelled at her daughter's words. "We missed you too, honey. Hey, how would you feel about helping your dad and me plan a little party?" Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. "A party? What for?" "Well," Sarah began, sharing a smile with Tom as he entered the kitchen, "your dad and I are thinking about renewing our wedding vows. Nothing too big, just a small celebration with family and close friends. What do you think?" Emma let out a squeal of delight, launching herself at her parents for a group hug. "That's so romantic. Can I be a bridesmaid this time? Please?" Sarah laughed, feeling the warmth of her family's love surround her. "Of course you can, sweetheart. We wouldn't have it any other way." As they sat down to breakfast together, Sarah marveled at how close she'd come to losing all of this. The laughter, the inside jokes, the comfortable silences, all the little moments that made up a life together. She'd nearly thrown it away for a fantasy, a fleeting passion that paled in comparison to the deep, abiding love she shared with Tom. Over the next few weeks, as they planned their vow renewal ceremony, Sarah found herself falling in love with Tom all over again. She noticed things she'd taken for granted before, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he always remembered to bring her coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, the gentle way he listened when Emma talked about her day. There were still moments of difficulty, of course. Sometimes, when Sarah stayed late at work or went out with friends, she'd catch a flicker of doubt in Tom's eyes. But instead of letting it fester, they'd talk about it openly, reaffirming their commitment to honesty and trust. The day of the vow renewal arrived, a perfect summer afternoon. They'd chosen to hold the ceremony in their backyard, transforming it into a romantic oasis with fairy lights and flowers. As Sarah stood before their gathered loved ones, her hand in Tom's, she felt a sense of rightness that brought tears to her eyes. "Tom," she began, her voice thick with emotion, 20 years ago, I stood before you and promised to love you for better or for worse. I didn't fully understand then what those words meant, but I do now. We've been through so much together, joy and pain, laughter and tears. There have been moments when I lost my way, when I forgot the precious gift we have in each other. But standing here today, I know with absolute certainty that you are the love of my life, my best friend, my home. I recommit myself to you, to us, to the family we've built. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of our lives." As she spoke, Sarah saw tears glistening in Tom's eyes, mirroring her own. When it was his turn to speak, his words of love and forgiveness nearly overwhelmed her. As they exchanged rings once again, Sarah felt as though they were starting a new chapter, one built on a foundation stronger than ever before. Later that evening, as they danced under the stars, Sarah rested her head on Tom's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Tom asked, pulling back slightly to look at her. "For not giving up on us," Sarah replied. "For fighting for our marriage, even when I didn't deserve it." Tom cupped her face gently, his eyes full of love. "Sarah, you are worth fighting for. We are worth fighting for. I'm just grateful we found our way back to each other." As they swayed to the music, surrounded by the love of their family and friends, Sarah felt a sense of contentment wash over her. The road that had brought them here hadn't been easy, but she wouldn't change it. Every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt had led to this, a love deeper and more meaningful than she'd ever thought possible. Sarah knew that life wouldn't always be perfect. There would be challenges ahead, moments of frustration or doubt. But she also knew that she and Tom had the strength to face whatever came their way, together. They'd weathered the storm of her almost affair and come out stronger on the other side. As the party wound down and their guests began to leave, Sarah found herself standing at the edge of their yard, looking up at the star-filled sky. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, so lost and confused, seeking validation in the arms of another man. That woman felt like a stranger now. She felt Tom's arms wrap around her from behind, and she leaned back into his embrace. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured. Sarah turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," she said honestly, "and how grateful I am for second chances." Tom smiled, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Me too," he said. "I love you, Sarah, more than ever." "I love you too," she replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. As they made their way back into the house hand in hand, Sarah felt a sense of excitement for the future. She didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but she knew that with Tom by her side, she could face anything. They'd rewritten their love story, transforming it from one of near tragedy to one of redemption and renewed passion. And as she fell asleep that night, curled up in Tom's arms, Sarah knew that this love, this life, this family, was all she'd ever need. The temptation of forbidden desire had nearly cost her everything, but in the end, it had led her back to where she truly belonged, and for that she would be forever grateful.